let's get started. My name's John Works. I'm the Voting Committee Chair for Montgomery County Tea Party. Thank you for coming out today, this Sunday afternoon. And again, on short notice, joining me is Pat Tibbs, our president, Dennis Tibbs, Brian Crumby, Ken Vaughn's board chair, and Larry Vaughn's vice president. Larry Rogers, sorry.
Unrelated.
The other brother.
Yeah, y'all are related.
That's right.
So, what we do, the kind of the layout is, you'll have up to 5 minutes for opening and closing statements, and then we'll have about 45 minutes, or up to 45 minutes of questions for you.
That's great.
Okay, so with that, why don't we get started, and if you'll introduce yourself.
Sure.
And proceed with your opening, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name is Chuck Meyer. Formerly, my name is Charles Meyer. I am I guess sort of a rare breed of lawyer. I'm an engineer with a law degree. I'm a patent attorney. So those of you that hate lawyers, think of me as an engineer who tries to solve problems, not create them as a lawyer. I am the proud husband of Monica Meyer for 32, nearly 33 years. We met at the University of Virginia, where I was an undergraduate student in systems engineering. And we've been through a lot in our 33 years. Well, I have and I'll explain that in a minute. I keep saying 33 years. My wife says we really are only married 32, but for some reason 33 sticks in my mind. I have 3 daughters. My eldest daughter, Catherine, is at Texas Tech at the moment. She organizes peer tutoring for students in difficult courses to retain them in Texas Tech's programs. My middle daughter, Emily, is one of the areas in which we've had some difficulties in our life because she suffers from a fatal neurological disease known as juvenile Batten disease. There is another child in the Woodlands, perhaps you've heard of him, Will Herndon. The Hope for Herndon Fund has frequent golf tournaments, and they also have frequent galas to support research into that particular affliction. My youngest daughter is on the honor committee at the John Cooper School. She's also a cheerleader. She wants to study biomedical engineering next year, and she's taking 5 AP courses in a variety of sciences and other disciplines. And she keeps us on our toes because all my daughters, even my middle daughter with her affliction, are extremely bright. Emily, my middle daughter, probably would have been a veterinarian if she didn't have the affliction. And whether or not I receive your vote in this election, I ask that I receive your prayers and good wishes for Emily as we battle this affliction. She's now 20 years old. She's at College Park High School in their transitions program. The most important job I've had in my life has been as a husband and father, but you need to know a little bit about my professional background because it is my professional background that I believe enables me to be a good representative on this board. I was the chief legal officer of what is now known as BlackBerry Research in Motion. I also, after I spent time in that position, I was the head of BlackBerry Europe outside London, England. I have run a subsidiary of a publicly traded company. I participated in taking a publicly traded company public. I know what demeanor you need when you are a leader of an organization that has to report to shareholders. And I view the Woodlands Township Board as a board of directors that gets their ultimate authority from the voters. We are the shareholders in the Woodlands Township. And I'm a little distressed that the board as a whole, across the board, and perhaps some of you saw my speech the other night, doesn't realize that they are servants of the people. They are not. They are nothing more and nothing less than public servants. And I congratulate all of them for taking up the mantle and being public servants. And everyone across the board, I can point to something good that they've done for the Woodlands. But too often they are too eager to resolve something before it's time. I don't know if any of you remember the old Gallo wine ads, we'll sell no wine before our time. I feel as though the board should take something from Gallo wineries, and when an issue is not ripe for a decision, unless there's some compelling reason to make a decision on an issue, you table it, or you wait until you have enough information so that you can intelligently and with integrity make a decision on an issue. My main points during this campaign are thinking about what we do as a government, as a township board, and not reacting, but proactively investigating what is the proper path, whether it's an expenditure or whether it is a support of a bond issue or a denial of support of a bond issue. I see my time is basically up. I'd much rather hear your questions and also your thoughts than to ramble on about my campaign.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll start off on, I don't know if you have your questionnaire, I don't have an extra copy.
I probably remember what I said. And
Okay.
if I'm inconsistent, you should call me out on it.
No problem, all right. In number 3, it was what 3 changes would you like to see implemented at the township? A couple questions I had on 2, or parts B and C.
Okay.
The first one is term limits,
Yes.
at least for the chair, if not for each board member.
Right.
And how long. And the second part, or C, you'd like to see greater transparency through the use of technology.
Sure.
Without sacrificing privacy, and
Right.
could you give some examples? So
It-
how or you want to address that?
Well, let's talk first about term limits. I was pleased to hear the other day, Barbara Cargill spoke to another organization in the Woodlands, and I asked her about term limits. And I was unaware that the State Board of Education had this term limit. Now, the individual seats were it, and I prefer that they be term limited. And I thought, well, Houston City Council has term limits, why don't we have term limits for our board? One of the biggest arguments against term limits is at the federal level, the power of the administrative bureaucracy. And some people suggest that if we had term limits, then the administrative state would take over. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but that's not a problem we have at the Woodlands Township level. I think the Woodlands Township has an excellent staff. I think they are very responsive to the people, and they do good work when it comes to budget time, laying out their projections. I have some difficulty with a minor amount of the projections that they made, but on the whole, I think their analysis is sound. I'm not worried about the administrative state of the Woodlands Township taking over if we had term limits. I'd like to see, I don't know, maybe change it to 3-year terms and have no more than 3 consecutive terms or 2 consecutive terms. Or if you leave it at 2 terms, 3 consecutive terms. In Ohio, where I hail from originally many years ago, I came to the Woodlands in 1995. Our governor in Ohio then, and still now, it's not my governor anymore, but they have term limits that are, you are allowed 2 consecutive terms and then you have to take a seat on the bench. And if you can get back in, then the people vote you back in after you've taken a seat on the bench, then you're entitled to 1 more additional term. And I think that way you aren't throwing out some really good individuals, but at the same time, you're allowing someone else to come in who might have equally good ideas or better ideas than the guy that you really liked, or gal. And so that answers the term limit question. In terms of transparency, they changed the statute with regard to Open Meetings Act, I believe a few years ago. I'm thinking 2006 maybe. It may have been sooner than that. I'd have to go back and look, to allow for the posting of emails between board members in a public entity. There's a system in place in MUD 40 that already does this, so that you can have conversations that are
Yes.
that are transparent to the public. This whole situation, let me call it that way, to use a somewhat neutral word, with the road bond negotiations, might have been prevented had all that email traffic on the outside been posted on the bulletin board that the statute provides for. I think it's a real slick, a resident of Panther Creek developed it, and I think it's really slick the way it works. I'd like to see both the county and the township consider adopting that. You don't have to use it, you don't have to have conversations, you can be there for whenever you want to use it, but the mayor of Houston was complaining that they can't communicate with each other to even schedule meetings or put items on the agenda. There's another aspect of the township that would benefit from that is, I don't know if everyone realizes, but the chair has been granted certain powers by the board to do things, and then it's later ratified by the board. Whenever you see a proclamation coming out of the board, the chair has the power to do that. I would sort of like to see that power restricted and force the chairperson to send out an email message to other members of the board that says, I'm intending to proclaim this to be, Wildflower Day in the Woodlands. Are there any objections? And if you receive a majority of objections from the board, then you don't proclaim it's Wildflower Day in the Woodlands. Is Wildflower Day in the Woodlands a particularly pernicious or dangerous proclamation? No, but in the hands of someone who wants to further political agenda, there may be other proclamations that you don't want the chair to make.
Okay.
So that's a long-winded explanation of the
All right.
thing. But
Well, and the reason I'll let you go is I forgot to tell you, we're gonna try to limit our answers to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Good. My fault.
good luck with me
Okay.
on that one. I'll try my best.
We'll crack the whip on you.
The attorney part of it doesn't want to do that.
I'm not charging by the word, really. I'm not.
What is the biggest hurdle you see coming up for the Woodlands?
Wow. That's a, there are so many things. I think we need to be on a path of understanding incorporation and what that means from a tax standpoint, from what powers we lose, what powers we gain. And that, people are thinking that this is an easy answer. But there's a heck of a lot of heavy lifting that we have to do before we can make a decision as to how we incorporate, when we incorporate. Do we become a general city? Do we become a charter city, somehow bypassing the general city stage through legislation proposed by our legislature? Overall, I think having government that's up to the task, no matter what the issue is probably the biggest hurdle. When it comes to our roads, having an effective relationship and a relationship where the county respects us and we respect the county, until we get control over our roads, mobility is an incredible issue that we face every day, but the township is virtually powerless in that area. We have to work with the county. And we have to listen to the people, although anyone that drives knows that we have mobility issues. So I've given you 2. I'd like to hear from anyone as to whether they think water is more important or community safety is more important. But to me, the biggest hurdle is having a township board that is capable of dealing with these issues, rather than any one of those particular issues.
But there's a question on county debt, not too many details in it. Just wondering, how familiar are you with the debt of the state of Texas and Montgomery County?
I think I put on the form, and if I didn't, I apologize. I've not delved into that. I've delved deeply into things that are township-centric. I know there are concerns about the debt level of the county, particularly as we add on an additional bond issue, particularly when the school board has its bond issue coming up. That's not county debt, but it's might as well be considered county debt. One of the reasons I've been made to believe, and I until someone shows me something to the contrary, one of the reasons that the debt of Texas is doesn't look so bad is that they pushed everything down to the lowest level possible. So the city of Houston is incredibly awash in debt. The counties are incredibly awash in debt. And if you add up all the lower level debt, we're probably 49th or 50th in the United States. That's a concern. And it's not something that I think that can sustain.
49 to 50, you mean the lowest?
Yeah, because if you collect all the debt, you know, we're
Lowest
probably
meaning good or lowest meaning bad?
bad.
Okay, okay.
It's all the highest.
Most of the debt.
Most of it.
Most of them,
Right. I mean, maybe Illinois, New York, and California, but I read somewhere recently that we would even be behind California, which I find incredibly hard to believe. But if you add up all the debt, thank goodness we've been able to sustain it so far, but you would think that our bond ratings would reflect that amount of debt, and I don't know why it doesn't. So I am a true engineer. When I see a problem like that, I want to learn more before I make any assessment that it's too much or too little. My sense is if those facts are that we are 49th in terms of the best debt level, that's a real problem. And if we're contributing in Montgomery County or in the township, where we do not see a path where we can sustain that debt in the future, then we need to do something about it.
Well, if the township's going to be in the habit of advocating for or against other debt, road bonds,
Right.
then they ought to know what the debt is for the rest of the county and the state.
That's a fair
And
point.
the state comptroller's page has a lot of information on it.
That's a fair point. I can't argue with that.
And you know, on your term limit thing, just for a little enlightenment, neighbors Louisiana have a rule like that. They actually let you go to prison. Then come back and they
Sorry.
Bang! Okay, my question.
I'm glad that we live in the great state of Texas, not in the neighboring state of Louisiana.
I have 3 quick questions.
All right.
So the likelihood of this race going into runoff is probably high.
There's no runoff in the township.
Okay, so
I wish there were a runoff
Okay,
because
okay.
I'm confident that I'd be in a runoff and I'm confident that I'd win.
okay, then I'll scratch my question. So the next question would be, you mentioned in here mobility is a huge problem. Where are you seeing the big problem? I see in where I live, 2978 is a problem, but the bond is not going to touch that road. It's a state road, and there's another road. It's a problem, and I think that's because they adjust the lights. Yes, there are problems in the county, but in the Woodlands, where's the problem?
Well, going Woodlands Parkway to 45 is a problem in the mornings.
A problem is it like back up 3 miles or?
Well, the other
'cause it's
morning-
rush hour, right?
The other
You're gonna
morning,
have-
I was backed up for quite a while.
5 minutes?
Because of
30
It's
minutes?
like 30 minutes.
Okay.
And on the way home I had a meeting downtown in Houston, and it was the radio said that from Beltway 8 to the Woodlands, 610 to the Woodlands was an hour trip.
Well, that's not the Woodlands,
and
that's 45, right?
It's 45. I
That's
agree.
not for Woodlands.
Um,
It's not gonna, the road bond's not gonna.
Mobility is a general problem in Montgomery County, and, in the whole area, in the Houston area. And where I see the Woodlands playing a role is to have a greater voice in the planning groups. Now, we already have one member of some of the subcommittees at HGAC. We've been told, as I've been told, that we don't have a seat on the HGAC regional planning group because we're not a city. Now, to me, that's silly. We might as well, we should have a seat whether we're a city or not. It's not like we are in concert with the county. A lot of times we're not in concert with the county.
Go back to the backing up of the roads. So at the end of August, when school started for the first 2 weeks.
Right.
Is it worse now than then? Or is it like I mean, you know, so the problem, the other day it being bad, okay, one day it's being bad. So, give me some feel for your opinion of how bad.
I don't travel during school time that often. I do take my daughter to College Park occasionally. Going up Gosling to 242 to College Park is just, it's a horrendous backup. And when people talk about wanting to build bike lanes, I shudder to think about what that will do to those roads. I just, my perception is that we have grown without adequate planning countywide as well as within the southern part of the county, the Woodlands part of the county.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where my sense is it's worse. And that if you have a Woodlands Parkway extension as it was in the first bond, it's even going to make it worse than it currently is.
Okay.
I want to come back to that later, but
Sure.
it's more of it.
Okay, so the first bond failed. You
Yes, sir.
against it. We have this new bond coming up,
Right.
and there's a bit of controversy around it.
Yes, sir.
What's your position on the November bond?
I think you need to separate the transparency issue from the underlying bond issue itself. And that's what the township board is unwilling to do. I have taken the position in public, and it's out in the press release about my statement to the township board the other day, that until there is the Texas, I'm in favor of the road bond, the underlying portion of the road bond. I may not want to support it if the Texas Rangers and the prosecutor, special prosecutor, determined that it was done in a way that violated law. One of the things that people don't know about me is I'm an assistant part-time prosecutor over in Hardin County. I strongly believe in respecting the rule of law. And if you've done something very well intended, but that becomes a violation of law, and I'm not saying it was or it wasn't, then maybe we have to look at whether one of the sanctions should be that the road bond not pass. But most people in the Woodlands don't realize that the Woodlands wouldn't have existed if it weren't for the people that outside of the Woodlands, such as Conroe city members, paying their tax dollars to do road work down in what became the Woodlands. And I think we are a little short-sighted if we aren't willing to support some of the rural communities that have, or not so rural communities, such as over in the Rayford Sawdust area or the Riley Fuzzle area, and support a road bond that takes care of those traffic situations, those mobility situations. So I'm in support of the road bond until someone tells me that it was illegally put on the ballot. I hope, and that is not the end result of the investigation, but it's not my place to make that determination. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. All right, Larry. Okay, so you currently have an office of law practice and
I work virtually. I have laptop, will travel. I'm not a litigator, so I don't need a large staff. I'm a business lawyer.
you were the founder, founder, president of the Lone Star Republicans. Just a brief background of that organization.
There was a Harris County Sheriff's deputy who ran for state senate by the name of Daniel McCool. He got a little time on Michael Berry's program because he founded the Caucasian Peace Officers Association in Harris County, and Daniel was a true conservative Republican activist, and he helped establish 2 Republican clubs in areas that weren't typically Republican. The Lone Star Republicans met or it continues to meet in various locations between Baytown and Liberty County. And one of the reasons I was interested in that organization, as you may be aware, I was a candidate for the U.S. Congress in the Republican primary in an area that included that, Congressional District 36.
Number 18, water taxes.
Yes.
You said $0 for water taxi.
Yeah,
What would you do?
I-
Make it private or?
well, I would certainly offer it to anyone that wanted to put a, Wood Ford's bank sign on it and pay for it to let them do it. I just don't think we need a water taxi. The reason that that water taxi exists is because, let's all understand, George Mitchell is a capitalist who looked to fund his plans any way he could, whether it was through private money or public money. And our distaste for crony capitalism is a recent phenomenon. Having been, the leader of a small startup company, and really the Woodlands was a startup. It was bigger than my startup company, BlackBerry. But you fund it however you can. And they got federal grants to build that waterway, and they needed boats on that waterway, and that's the reason we had those boats. Now, does it add to the ambiance of the Woodlands? Perhaps. But it's a very costly way of adding to the ambiance of the Woodlands, and I'm not so sure we need it to attract business or residents to the Woodlands. We're nearly full in terms of residents, and we're very fortunate that we have a very good business base that pays taxes.
All right.
All right. I don't know that going against crony capitalism is a recent phenomenon. I can
Well,
assure you.
maybe with
I
maybe with that label,
Three minutes.
What's that? No, just increase the jingle
Oh.
on the time expires.
Okay.
You ready? Going back to Brian's question, just to comment, you remember Alden Bridge, right?
No, Panther Creek.
Panther Creek.
I'm the
sorry.
vice president.
Oh, okay. At the Alden Bridge meeting, and this is just a sidebar, Commissioner O'Reilly said that he's gonna let TxDOT take care of 242 between Gossel and 242. And I know how bad that is, and he knows how bad it is. He lives right off of that, and we're not too far down from that. So I would suspect that township, even though they don't have any control over that, should be able to push to get stuff like that done, especially as pertains to the mobility side.
That's good, useful information to know. I was unaware of that. I need to get over and see Charlie Riley because both he and James are very important in this whole equation as to how we relate to the county.
On number 9, township budget funds all reserves 100% yearly. Should any surplus be returned to residents or retained in a rainy day fund? You answered, I'd like to see a true rainy day fund for the cost of planning for the transition from a township to a city. How much?
No more than what it takes and no less than what it takes. I don't know what that would be. I'm the only candidate that actually sat through all those budget days. Out in my car, I could bring you in the budget book. I'd like to see us move to more of a zero-based budgeting process, and then I could give you an answer of what that should be. I think we spend what strikes me as an inordinate amount of money on consultants that make assumptions that aren't necessarily reflective of reality. I've only now begun the process of looking at the last study about what it would cost to transition to a city. I don't know how much those studies cost, but I was raised that you pick pennies off the ground and you use coupons at a store and you get the best deal possible. My father bought and sold grain and he got the best deal possible for his customers. And I don't see that the township has that mentality when it engages people for services or for anything other than our fire equipment. think that's one area in which, by buying through the co-op pool, we probably are getting the most bang for our buck, and that's good, because that's a huge, big ticket item. So I can't tell you if it's $1 million, $10 million. We have this $3 million sort of quasi rainy day fund. It's really been obscured because I don't think they have a consensus as to what to use that $3 million to. Wherever possible, I want to pay the least taxes possible as well as everyone around this table. But until you tell me what the price of oil is going to be, I can't tell you what level of expenditures we should have or how much should be set in reserve or what our taxes should be.
So you would tie it to the price of oil?
No, I wouldn't tie
And gas.
I wouldn't directly tie it to the price of oil, but I certainly would have the most conservative approach possible based upon what, and maybe tying the price of oil wouldn't be a bad idea. I just never thought of it. But I would have the most conservative approach based upon various prices of oil as it correlates to property values.
Okay. We've got roughly, we started at 10 after.
10 after.
We've got
3 minutes?
10, roughly 10 minutes, 12 minutes. I think one more time around the
All
table.
right.
I heard one of the present board members say that they were leaving because that's how they were leaving because they were tired of fighting, keeping them from spending more money, i.e. skating rink. There's talk of making it a permanent thing owned by the Woodlands instead of whatever, and other things. Do you see these as problems or?
Part of that I see as a problem. I don't like the fighting. And if I could wave a magic wand, I'd want to see 5 votes for every issue instead of 4. I don't think the board acts in concert, except, and when they do sometimes, they're just all off the mark, such as the most recent township discussion of the bond. All I can do is be responsible for my own vote and try to convince people that, times are tough. People are laying off that you never thought would be laid off. I have a friend, an acquaintance, I guess would be more appropriate, that works for a major oil company that I won't mention, but one that hasn't been in the news. And this person is losing his or her job. And she or he is fairly high up in the company. This is a company that is, I'm only reluctant not to discuss what it is because I'm on tape, and I don't want to damage this person's reputation. But when a major company like that is laying off, times are not as good as they think they are. And in my world, I see a lot of oil and gas lawyers looking for work. These are not times in which we can spend as though the good times will never end. And we're very fortunate that our property values have gone up, except when we look at our tax bill. But that's not going to continue. And I like what has been done by Dan Cox over at Conroe ISD. You may disagree with me as to whether or not he's conservative enough, but they've taken a relatively conservative position as to what the future of our tax base is going to be. And that's responsible governance. That's responsible leadership. I'd like to have that attitude installed within the board. And, I'm bullheaded enough that I'm willing to buck my head against the wall in order to try to convince people that this is not the time to be spending.
Yeah.
Okay, I just looking for some simple clarifications on a couple things. You mentioned the bike lanes, so are you for the bike lanes or against the bike lanes?
The case has not been made to me I'm willing to keep an open mind, but the case has not been made to me that we need bike lanes on Gosling Road or anywhere else in Woodlands.
Okay,
That's the answer to the question, but
Yeah. And being a Woodlands resident, how did you get involved with the Tri-County Tea Party and working in Hardin County?
because I ran for Congress over there, not in that area.
Okay. And on your list of
Because you used
things,
to live over there?
did
Yeah,
you live there?
I lived there for, what's it? I think I lived there for 9 months. Now, when I say lived there.
So does that mean you went there to run?
I moved there because I thought if I won, the people deserved a congressman that had lived in that district.
Okay.
But as you know, you don't have to live, it's the only seat in which you don't have to live in the district more than one.
That's the seat that Dwayne Stovall's running for now?
Yes, it is.
And on your list, you did mention the Woodlands Parkway extension as being one of your objections to the bond. What other objections were there, and have they been addressed in the new bond?
Well, that one certainly has. I like what the discussion around what is maintenance and what isn't maintenance, and I like the sort of the approach to maintenance where we try to take as much maintenance out of it as we can. Capital bonds should not be used for routine maintenance, but when you're talking about tearing up at some point a major road, because that's the only way to maintain it, is that a capital expenditure or is that a maintenance expenditure? I don't know, but I'd say that if you're spending multiple millions of dollars to tear up a road, that's a capital improvement, not a maintenance of the road. So, other than that, my sense is that, and I hate to sound like a politician, but I'd like to be able to get back to you on that. My impression is that most of what we collectively complained about in the last bond has been taken care of. But both sides have tried to eliminate those items that were most irritating to the voters and most inappropriate. But if there are things in the bond that you don't think have been taken care of in this next bond, I'd like to know what they are.
Well, the transparency issue and
Yeah.
the debt aspect of it, but we don't have time for that today.
Okay.
Actually, miscalculated earlier, we have, let's see, we started at 10 after roughly, is that right? 5-minute opening, so we're 35 minutes into it, just about 45. So we'll go with questions until straight up at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Kim, sorry.
No, come back to me.
Brian.
So you had a short question last time, it turned into a long question.
Yeah,
So my question is, at various levels of government, we have a government providing things that are, from safety to business to parks to welfare to education to everything. So, taking it down to the scope of the Woodlands Township, what are the legitimate forms of government for the Woodlands Township? And what would,
Government or expenditures?
township is a government entity, right?
Right.
Okay, so what's legitimate for them to engage in and what's not legitimate for them to engage in? Are they, You mentioned before in your previous thing safety, and you mentioned mobility.
Well, there are two roles, proper roles, as far as, in my opinion. One is to manage the purse, our taxpayer money, and be good stewards of that. And the second is to advocate on those issues over which they have no control, on behalf of the citizens. So having a good relationship with our county commissioners that overlap with the Woodlands, having a good relationship with the commissioners' court, when I say good relationship, I mean one that is respectful of the wishes of the citizens. So,
Well,
in
okay,
terms of.
let me explain my question, because I don't think I'm explaining it well enough.
Okay.
So we've got issues of, are we gonna have a park or not
Right.
have a park? Are we gonna have a skating rink or not have a skating rink?
Right.
Are we gonna have, private police, or are we gonna have city police?
Right.
Roads, so that's kind of more of what I intended my question to be.
Right. And I guess I look at it a little differently, and that is, we need to prioritize our expenditures, with one of those expenditures being, or one of the constraints on that prioritization being minimizing taxes. So we only fund those things that are strictly necessary for the operation of the Woodlands and to protect this asset called the Woodlands. It is an asset that we all have. I mean, if we.
But it's got a different view of what that asset should look like.
Right.
So
Well,
how do you
and
determine?
I think that the woodland should remain wooded. Let's start there. And we should maintain our parks that we currently have. Now, should we build an Olympic-sized swimming pool with taxpayers' money? Someone has to make a case to me that improves our asset, or is an essential function, which I can't imagine how someone can make a case, or that it will increase the value of our homes so that we have the ability to drop our tax rate to a lower point. So I've yet to see an expenditure that's clearly outside the bounds of this unique creation of the township, but I've seen a lot of expenditures that are nice to have rather than need to have. So I'm in favor of expenditures and the use of the power for maintaining this place we call the Woodlands as a place where we want to live, work, pray, play, whatever.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. So we've talked a fair amount about mobility. We haven't touched on transit type projects yet. Woodlands is probably going to become a city. There's going to be increasing needs for more urban style transit. There's already been suggestions of free shuttles and stuff around the core area there. What's your opinion on those sorts of transit services?
I like the buses that go downtown and leave at 5:40 in the morning. I think that's been a very useful transportation project. I'm not convinced that having shuttles, one of the drivers I've been told of having shuttles between Hughes Landing and the town center has been Exxon Corporation. My feeling is, I've worked for many companies that had their own shuttle buses that they provide to their employees. I'm not so sure that that's an appropriate, going back to your government function, providing shuttle buses that are used by a small class of citizens. I would make an exception for senior citizens. That one, I'm more on the fence, but I think a case can be made for senior citizens than it can for employees of any large multinational corporation, if that's the true beneficiaries of it. There was more to your question than that, I thought, but maybe not.
Do you have any opinion on the free shuttle services around the core of the Woodlands?
If you're talking about the free shuttle services for the senior citizens?
No, more like the trolley services.
Oh, the trolley services? I have not looked at how much that costs the township. It's not in my list of top 10 expenditures for the Woodlands, but it's also not on my list of top 10 things that I would cut. In this imaginary list, which I can't tell you what those are, I can only tell you. I mean, I'll get back to you on that too if you really want to know what I would cut and what I would keep. It certainly doesn't rise to the level of fire trucks expenditures, or the expenditures we have with the sheriff's department for the deputies, or the constable's office in Harris County that we have for the deputies that patrol down the creek side. It has to be prioritized. And we have to come to some decision of where we cut the line, and not do what they currently do, and that is, well, we're gonna take the budget that we had from last year and see what we're gonna add to it and see what we're gonna take from. No, we start from fresh, and we build up the expenditures that benefit most in the Woodlands, benefit our property values, and maintains the Woodlands as the community where we wanna work, play, pray, and eat. And
We got
Sorry.
about 4 minutes left.
Okay, number 20 talks about George Mitchell and sustainability communities and
Right.
funded international meetings that we have here. And you gave a pretty detailed response. Just elaborate a little bit on that. You said you think that George Mitchell had the vision to build a community that had jobs, entertainment, churches, schools, and businesses in a self-contained, self-sufficient community. How does that relate to sustainability? Just give us a little
Well,
overview of that.
there's sustainability that the left, and I think I even put on the form. I object to anyone claiming that they own what sustainability is. Sustainability, defined by what I would call the political left, means government control. How I define sustainability is when the time comes to pay for something, can you afford it? And is it necessary to complete your vision to have certain parts of that vision that are very expensive, perhaps? I don't think George Mitchell had the United Nations definition from Agenda 21 of sustainability in his mind when he wanted a sustainable community. He wanted nothing more than a beautiful place to live, raise our kids, send them to school, take them to church with us, go to nice restaurants that want to locate in the Woodlands. He wanted it wooded. He wanted it to be a place where we are proud to rest our heads at night and proud to work, if we're fortunate enough to have a job in the Woodlands, to work our job. But he didn't want to have the government, I believe, control the environmental nature of it, or I'm trying to think of, typically when you hear the word sustainability, all the different criteria the left would use is to define what is sustainable and what is not. And when George Mitchell used that term, I don't think he was using it in the way that the United Nations and the Agenda 21 folks use it.
Sound like everybody.
Okay. Actually did, he wrote a book about it. He was considered the godfather of sustainability and.
But of that,
Oh, yeah, back in the 70s, he actually hosted meetings here.
I understand that he hosted meetings, but I haven't read the book. I know when I use the word sustainability, it means nothing more than that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the question was more towards what was his vision and what he was going to vote about. There was probably some co-opting in there, but by and large, that was his mindset too as well. Just a little bit of difference in the aspect of control.
Well, one aspect of his vision, he firmly believed we should be part of Houston. That's one aspect that, if any candidate says that he or she believes in George Mitchell's vision, I would ask them particularly, was that do you believe in the part of the vision where it says that we should be part of Houston?
So it took a lot of HUD money to get us started too. I think in the order of about 55 million to kick off. And you're right as far as he believed in public-private partnership aspect. Not that I do, but one more question. I think who do you most identify with on the township, and who do you most identify?
These days, no one. after the other night. Well, I was critical of more than just Bruce, and I was critical of the whole board because,
Just one name, one person, because we're almost out of time.
I don't identify with anyone on the board.
Okay, what about post president?
What
Sure.
president do I identify with through
What,
history?
what candidate, sorry,
Oh, what candidate?
presidential candidate?
I don't have a candidate yet. I don't even have a candidate for Speaker of the House. So, I don't identify with John Boehner, and I don't identify with Jeb Bush. But beyond that, the field is still open to me. I don't know.
Do you have a top 2 or 3?
I have a top 10, maybe. But
Do you have an opinion about Stovall?
Dwayne's gonna have an uphill battle. I know Dwayne from when he was running against John Otto, and I was running,
Is he running against John on a seat this time, or a different seat?
he's running against Brian Babb for
Well,
Congress.
let's go ahead and do our closing, and then we can jump into
All
other
right,
races.
all right.
Unless you want us to continue with questions, it's your option, 5 minutes for closing.
I would actually, I would like none of the above, quite frankly. I'd like to hear, and maybe this is not the right forum, but I really want to learn from you all. I appreciate your comment about George Mitchell's book. I still believe that George Mitchell was a very shrewd capitalist, and whether he was playing in that book in order to further his capitalist notions, I don't know. I haven't read the book, and I haven't talked to anyone about the book.
Let's go one more round, and
Sure.
then we can chat off there.
Yeah.
if we need to.
So,
Okay, you don't want to close, so we can, all right, so we've got about 3 minutes. Probably time for one more question and answer, or 2 at most.
don't all jump in at once.
So we go, we're doing.
Well, just a quick question.
Sure.
I think it's probably legal for the Commissioners Court to advocate for a bond as they did last time. Is it legal and or appropriate for Woodlands Township to be taking a position on bonds?
I don't think it's illegal for a different governmental entity to be taking a position for a bond, a county bond, a school bond, medical, Montgomery County Hospital District bond, or a Lone Star bond.
Let me jump back to a question he asked about.
But whether it's, are you talking about a township bond, or are you
Well,
talking?
no, I mean, the township has come out for the last 2 bonds.
Right.
They were really, I think they were for the last one, and then they turned against this one, right?
Well, there are 2 issues. One, is it legal? I think it is, but I don't know. I just assumed it's legal. I know what it's.
But it's not for the county.
The county could comment on bonds other than
Their own.
a county bond. No. And whether it's prudent or wise is another story. I just want people to think about what they do before they make themselves look foolish.
Well,
And
why would we punish commuters for the crimes of commissioners?
why would we punish commuters for? Oh, that's a nice phrase. I like that.
Sounds so.
It's kind of loaded.
Well,
Assuming they're guilty.
you're not, A, assuming that there has been a violation,
Well-
but B, it's not punishment. There's always the possibility of another road bond issue. It's not a legal sanction, and it is, in fact, the matter, I think there's an opinion coming out of the county attorney that the road bond doesn't get voided even if there is a technical or not so technical violation of the Open Meetings Act. So they may not be punished by a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I just don't like to see, I don't like to support things that were created potentially in violation of the law. I'm very much a believer that this is as good as it's going to get in terms of road bond, and that we should all support it until such time as it's demonstrated to me and the rest of the voters that it was procured in a way that was designed to punish the commuters
Right.
and punish the taxpayers.
Okay, great. That wraps it up.